All right. Good morning. My name is Aisha Spradley, Professional Learning and Instruction Coordinator for PSAYDN, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator for this session. I want to welcome you to the first installment of the OST Education and Awareness Campaign Series. Setting the stage for advocacy is today's session. To ground our work today, we have an icebreaker question. In moments when the path forward isn't clear, what inspires you to keep fighting for and supporting OST programs? You can type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and share. Sandra said children and families. Anne said the kids, the students, providing safe place for kids, the students and their communities, children and families, watching the kids have new experiences, the cause, how much learning and discovery happens in OST hours, the students and providing meals, keeping good in the world, absolutely. Okay. What it means to the students, families, and community. Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely. All right, if that's the last one, thank you all for sharing so openly what inspires you and why this work matters. And with that intention in mind, I will hand it over to PSAYDN Director Contrail Armour. Oh, and Perlene said, knowing that the students' passions and innovation come alive. I would love that. Perfect.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Aisha. And good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this important kickoff session as we launch PSAYDN's 2025-26 Education and Awareness Campaign. Our Education and Awareness Campaign, themed Voices for Youth Advancing OST, is designed to elevate the power of youth voice while, while unifying or uniting providers, families, and policymakers, as well as partners around the shared goal of strengthening out-of-school time programs across Pennsylvania. This campaign intentionally builds momentum month by month, spotlighting advocacy, visibility, workforce development, STEM innovation, equity, and youth leadership. By aligning each theme with pressing policy opportunities in statewide events, we're not only amplifying the critical role that OST plays in education and workforce pipelines, but also ensuring that young people themselves are at the forefront of shaping the future. Together, these efforts create a coordinated movement to secure policies, funding, and equity that advance opportunities for all youth across the Commonwealth. Please note, in addition to the themes that you'll see on our scheduled calendar for the year, the network is currently in the process of reaching out to legislators here in Pennsylvania, as well as the Pennsylvania U.S. congressmen to attend these monthly sessions. What we would like to do on top of these themes and the information that we'll share is to invite those legislators in to hear from constituents in their respective district or region about the impact of out-of-school time. So if you're on here this morning and you're interested in meeting with your legislator in one of these sessions and talking about the impact that your out-of-school time program is having, please don't hesitate to reach out to the network. We'll be sure at our best to try to schedule your district assigned legislator to attend one of these virtual sessions. I'm going to have a quick walkthrough at the end of Chris's presentation of a few resources that probably hit your desk over the past couple of months, but I just want to go ahead and click on some of those links and show you exactly what's happening. And I would almost say the ease of reaching out to your legislator to begin those conversations. So we are honored to have with us today Chris Neitzey, the Senior Director of Policy at the Afterschool Alliance. Chris is a national leader in advancing after-school and summer learning policy. His work has helped shape federal priorities, secure bipartisan support for out-of-school time programs, and strengthen advocacy efforts across the country. We are fortunate to have him share his insights with us today. This session is designed to ground us in both the national and state landscape, helping us see how recent policy wins at the federal level connect to our own advocacy goals here in Pennsylvania. Chris will also share some strategic strategies that have proven successful in the engaging policymakers in elevating the visibility of out-of-school time programs. Please help me in using your your reaction button in welcoming Chris Neitzey from the Afterschool Alliance. Chris.
Hey, thanks so much, Cantrell. And it's an honor to be kicking this off with y'all. All right. So, first and foremost, kind of wanted to give folks an update on what's happening at the federal level. So I'm Chris Neitzey. I'm with the Afterschool Alliance. So we are based in Washington, D.C. And most of our work is focused at the federal level, making sure that programs like 21st Century community learning centers continues to be maintained and ultimately, greater investments are put into those programs at the federal level. So that's kind of our priority and our mission. And we also love to help support the folks at the state and even local level around state advocacy actions and local advocacy actions, not always just in service to like the federal advocacy, but also to the statewide advocacy. But obviously, there's a lot happening in Pennsylvania. There's a huge win last year, and hopefully, we're able to build on that this year. So, gonna run through kind of like the recap of the summer. There was this, I think most folks here understand how busy of a summer it was, pretty unexpectedly busy. And then looking at kind of the next few months into the next year, what that will look like at the federal level, what we can do to make sure that after school and summer programs remain a top priority for Congress, and how we can really celebrate the field, especially when it comes to October and lights on after school. So wanted to kick us off here with just kind of a quick recap for folks that were involved in this effort over the summer. You probably followed along as the administration withheld education funding, $6.8 billion in education funding. 1.3 billion of that was for 21st century programs. You probably saw all the different alerts that we sent out or PSAYDN sent out, or all the various other allies of ours sent out. The Boys and Girls Clubs were huge partners in this. The YMCA's, all of those folks were key figures in helping to eventually free up this money and release it out to the states. This was also a bipartisan effort. So not a lot of things are bipartisan supported these days in Congress, but we can say for a fact after school is a top bipartisan issue. And we had, Republicans and Democrats really pushing on the administration to release those funds. And, mid to late July, we finally saw that come through, and funds were sent out to the states. So congratulations to everyone that took part in that effort. It was, I think, at times it was incredibly frustrating and challenging, but ultimately we prevailed. And I think that gave us a lot of momentum going into the fall, when Congress comes back into session in the next 2 weeks, to really make sure that it remains a top priority of theirs, as they're looking at the next federal fiscal year budget. So just kind of here's like a quick overview. I don't want to kind of run through all of these by bullet point, but this is kind of that story of what happened with 21st Century, along with the other 5.5 billion in education funding. They were withheld by the administration, weren't sent out to states. Ultimately, through the efforts of programs themselves, the state networks doing all the media hits and getting that out into the media, and then people ultimately calling on their Congress members, we were able to free up that money. And those grant award notifications were sent out to the state education agencies. There were a few days there of uncertainty around some potential new requirements. Ultimately, those were rescinded, in the grant award notifications. Look to be the same as in previous years. So that's a huge win for the field. Kind of what got us there. I think this is and this is something that a lot of allied partners in the education world, especially when all those additional education funds were still being withheld, everyone's trying to understand, like, what did the after school field do so well to get that money freed up and ultimately released. So just kind of like looking back, it's like a case study of what was successful in this effort. We had, the grassroots action. We had over 109. It's probably more like 110,000 emails were sent by individuals to their elected officials. So these were, Congress members, but they were also governors, because we needed the governors to really push on the administration to say, hey, this money we're expecting, our programs are going to shut down at this particular date if we don't get these funds. The attorneys general across the country, we know that the governor in Pennsylvania joined that effort with the 22 Democratic AGs, and ultimately suing the administration. Fortunately, we didn't have to wait on the results of that court case, because the money was eventually released. Tons of outreach to also some state legislators as well, but also to the grass tops folks. So the Education Secretary McMahon at the Department of Education, the OMB director, who was ultimately the one kind of withholding this money, having folks with influence reach out to them and call on them to release those funds. And not just releasing the funds, but telling the story of after school and how it's such a bipartisan effort. I think there was a lot of surprise at how this was such a bipartisan, or this was supported in a bipartisan way. And then the media stories, I mentioned that earlier, like the programs that were stepping up, the networks that were stepping up. We tracked at least 2,000 plus media stories since July 1st. This is a lot of, the top level, the national publications that I showed in that previous slide around, the Washington Post, the New York Times, The Hill, Edweek, those types of particular, national level type publications, but also the local stories. Localizing that issue, we've got this withholding of funds, but what does this actually look like at the program level? So lots of great interviews with program directors and parents, really explaining the importance of these programs and how, what that withholding will actually do and impact the communities. And then, that ultimately led to that bipartisan action. We had 10 Republican senators on the Appropriations Committee sending a letter to Office of Management and Budget. That was kind of unseen up to that point, kind of that pushback from Republican appropriators. So that was a key piece in freeing up that money. So that was kind of the look back of how we got there, and it's a great model for future actions that I think most of us are anticipating. At some point we're going to have to kick the field into gear. I love the icebreaker question that was kind of looking like it in times of uncertainty, or when things are kind of at their worst, like what inspires you. I think this past summer is something that truly inspired us at the Afterschool Alliance, really seeing the best of our field sometimes at the worst times, right? Like seeing such a threat to the field and seeing the reaction and everyone stepping up and participating and making sure that ultimately the policymakers that are making that decision understand the importance and the potential downfalls of those decisions. So that was something that truly inspired us at the Alliance and kept us going and will keep us going over the next few years as well. So what's next? So we are currently in fiscal year 25. The federal fiscal year ends September 30th, 2025. So a little over a month away from now. Congress would, in theory, have to pass a new budget. So they're currently the Senate was working on that a little bit before recess. So right now, all the members are back in district. This is August recess. So they're back in district. You've probably seen a lot of coverage of the town halls. So a lot of town halls are being held, a lot of visits, a lot of constituent outreach happening over the next kind of week and a half, and then they'll be back after Labor Day, back in DC, and that's when things will pick back up. So this is a process that typically takes months. It usually starts in the spring. It got a slight delay in the process. The president's budget proposal didn't come out until late May, so they're typically Congress likes to work off of that, but they started ahead of time because that budget proposal was taking so long. But this would have to pass a new budget. They would have to pass a new budget by September 30th, or a couple other various things can happen. They can pass a continuing resolution. or they can pass various pieces of the federal budget and do some continuing resolutions for other pieces. So we'll see what happens over the next month of September. A couple things could happen. We might somehow have a full budget passed. It's been many, many years since that's happened on time. So I think the odds of that happening are pretty low. But we might also get a couple continuing resolutions for a certain amount of time, temporary, maybe a few months, maybe into the spring, potentially for another full year. Or we could have a government shutdown. So just recapping kind of what that process has looked like so far. So this is just, I think most folks have probably seen this at some point over the last few months, but wanted to reshare the president's budget that came out in late May and what that had in it. It had steep cuts to non-defense discretionary. So the federal budget is typically broken into defense spending and non-defense spending. And there are huge cuts proposed in the non-defense side, which includes education and human services, childcare, things like that. Reiterating that this is proposal only, and if we went back to 2017 through 2020, we had a lot of proposals that were proposed by the president, and not a lot of those proposals became reality. But I think we're in a different place in this new administration and kind of what Congress is open to supporting. However, just wanted to reiterate that this is a proposal. I'm going to jump ahead 2 slides because I want to, and then I'll jump back, but wanted to focus on 21st century in that budget proposal. So this is, a program that a lot of us care about. It's federal funding supporting after school, a big chunk of change in Pennsylvania, supporting lots of programs across the state. Within that budget proposal, the president proposed essentially eliminating that program and rolling it in with 17 other discretionary grant and formula grant programs into this new kind of block grant called the K-12 Simplified Funding Program, and then cutting that by $4.5 billion. So if you were to take all of those different 18 programs on the left side there, add them up, it comes to about $6.5 billion. The president proposed, adding those up into one block grant and then cutting that by $4.5 billion down to $2 billion. So it's essentially a cut and an elimination of 21st century, along with many other education programs that you can kind of see there. It's very small because there's so many of them, but the 17 other programs in addition to 21st century, like Title IV-A, a lot of different full service community schools, things like that. So lots of different education programs rolled into that one block grant proposal. Probably should have jumped this one ahead of that president's budget proposal, but here's kind of that appropriations roadmap that I sort of laid out in words earlier, but it's always easier to see this in writing, what that looks like. So the president's budget submitted to Congress, overall spending levels are set by the House and the Senate as a baseline for those appropriations committees to work off of. Those appropriations committees sort of mark up their bills and basically say, like, here's what we want those funding levels to look like in the Senate side. Here's what the House wants to do. If you were to like, where we're at in this process right now is we're kind of between that third and fourth one. So the money in the handshake. We've got some work that's happened in the Senate so far. Not so much work has happened in the House. They've set their levels in the House, but the Senate has actually marked up a few appropriations bills. So we're kind of between that. Eventually, they need to get that last piece where the president signs a budget bill into law, and that might take a few months more than the fiscal years actually got left in it. So that would require some sort of continuing resolution or a government shutdown to get that. So jumping ahead again, the appropriations bills in the House and Senate. So this was another bit of good news before Congress went on recess. So on top of the release of the 21st century funds, I think it was the following week, the Senate Appropriations Committee marked up their fiscal year labor health, that's LHHS education bill. So Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education bill was marked up on July 31st. It was a Thursday. This was one that we were a little concerned, like, where is the Senate going to stand on this? After we had 10 of those Republican senators say, like, you need to free up this money. It's incredibly important to our constituents. We anticipated them supporting it, but we're still like uncertain on what that would look like. However, in the end, at the end of the day, that Senate Appropriations Committee passed that education bill, the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education bill, pretty much level funding on a lot of those education programs, including 21st Century, Title IV Part A, AmeriCorps. They were all at the last year's funding level, which was a huge win. I think a lot of that is due to all of the action that happened in July to release those 21st Century funds and the education that was happening with those members of Congress to help them understand the importance of those programs. Ultimately led to them keeping those funds at a level of the previous year. And then some small increases in two programs, this Title I, so that's the big flexible formula fund that comes from the feds to the districts. And then Child Care Development Block Grant Saul, I think it was a 40 or a $50 million increase. That's a multi-billion dollar funding stream. So it's a very, very small increase, but still good to see some support there. The other piece that was incredibly important is the Senate essentially rejected that consolidation proposal that I talked about with the 18 different funding streams into one. The Senate instead said, no, we're going to continue to fund all of these individual title and discretionary programs at that previous level. So that was another huge win. So the next thing that happens, once Congress is back after Labor Day, the House Appropriations Committee is scheduled to mark up their version of the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education bill. That's where we'll see where the House stands on this. I mean, we've got a big win in having the Senate behind us when it comes to support for after school, but it's a little uncertain on where the House stands at the moment. They did propose big cuts to that bill at the top line level, the amount of money that's essentially available for that bill. So we'll have to see how that shakes out in the actual markup process. So that's kind of where our focus is at the moment, is making sure the House and the members on that Appropriations Committee understand the importance. We've had some folks across the country have been doing some site visits in August with those members to get them out to programs to really help them see the importance of the program. So when they're back in DC and deciding, making these decisions on funding levels, hopefully they think about that visit and what those programs meant to all those kids. So here's kind of our next steps as well. So we're still looking to gather stories on impact. So I know we've had a lot of folks that have contributed to this, and it still remains an ask of ours if you have any stories of impact. So before these impacts were, what's the withholding of funds? What kind of impacts has that had? But we are also open to hearing about the impacts of the programs too, and what you've seen these programs providing to members of the community and kids in the program. We've also got a website that's very active, Afterschool Works for America. That's kind of our landing page for a lot of these advocacy actions. It's got resources, so lots of social media, sample tweets and sample posts. A couple other types of materials as well, along with a nice map that essentially, shows what the president's budget proposal would look like in action and the amount of funds that would be cut to every state, including Pennsylvania. So yeah, so that's kind of our big focus. And that last bullet there is really focused on what folks here can hopefully do. I know Cantrell mentioned outreach to members of Congress, also some state legislators, but members of Congress as well. So that's something we're really looking to build, congressional champions in the House and Senate. Right now, the senators don't sit on those appropriations committees, but that's at the current session or the current session of Congress. So every 2 years, the Congress kind of changes up who sits on different committees. So we don't know where those members might sit in future sessions of Congress. So we always want to work on building up any House representative or any U.S. senator. So in the future, when hopefully they're sitting on a committee overseeing funding for education in the 21st century, they're already kind of in support. They're bought in on the power of after school. So that's one piece there that we're really maintaining a focus on is building up kind of those future champions of after school. Site visits are a huge way to build support and build those champions. So we've got tons of resources on how to hold a site visit. I'm sure Cantrell is happy to share stuff from PSAYDN as well. If you're ever looking to host a site visit, make sure you let the network know. I'm sure they would love to attend as well to make sure that they can speak to after school at the state level as well. But lots of different timelines of what a site visit looks like, who you need to engage in that process, who you should invite, kind of the do's and don'ts of a site visit. But always encouraging folks here, if you run a program, to think about how you can invite either a member of Congress or even a state legislator or even local mayors or county council members or any kind of elected official, making sure that they're out and potentially seeing the program in action. You don't know where some of those mayors might end up in a few years or state legislators might end up in a few years. So if they're eventually in Congress, it's good that you did some work on the early end to really build up their understanding of the importance. And then the big thing here in the next few months is Lights On After School. So we are super excited about this year's Lights On After School. It's taking place October 23rd, 2025. That's a Thursday. We typically have around 8,000 events nationwide. It's really a chance to shine the light on after school and the impacts of those programs that they have on kids and communities. And invite people into the programs too. So a lot of open houses are being held, a lot of opportunities to invite elected officials like members of Congress. The next thing that we have going on is a Lights On After School webinar. It's on September 4th, so that is a Thursday, I believe, at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find all that information at afterschoolalliance.org/LOA. There's a link on that main page to register for the webinar, but then there's all the other information on how to actually hold a Lights On After School event. But this is a great opportunity. We put out, the media blasts, so a lot of media outlets will look at that and say like, oh, what's happening in my area? So it's a good chance to make sure that your program, your Lights On After School program is registered in our database so they can easily find that and reach out and hopefully come out and visit and do a little story on it. I mentioned our After School Works for America website, just wanted to plug that again, and all the different resources that are there for you, particularly around 21st century. The other thing that's happening in the next few months, just actually it's the week before Lights On After School, is the release of America After 3. And this is our research that we do every 5 to 6 years. So it's been 5 years since our last release of America After 3. So 2020, we actually wrapped up in the field in early March of 2020 and released it later that fall. So this will be our first look at numbers kind of post-COVID and where things stand when it comes to after school participation and demand. So it's our parent survey that we put out. We're releasing that in mid-October, that week before Lights On. We'll have a full dashboard of what those numbers look like in Pennsylvania. We've also got an oversample happening. So we event every once in a while, with some additional funds, we're able to kind of dig down in a certain city or county, and we're able to do that for Allegheny County this coming report. So we'll have some additional information and numbers on what after school participation demand looks like in Allegheny County and in the Pittsburgh area. So that'll be very exciting. So we're looking forward to releasing this and leveraging this to really share the story of after school. So those are kind of the big things that are happening. I like to end this as many of these presentations as possible with kind of just reiterating the support that we find among the general public for the work that's happening after school. This is a voter poll that we wrapped up late last year and released in January of this year that really shows the public support for for the value of after school. So nearly 9 in 10 voters agreeing that after school programs are an absolute necessity for their communities. And you can see how that's trended upwards over the last 6 years, which is incredible news. You can also see that this is something that's across the board, whether it's Republicans, Independents, or Democrats. And this is great to see because it's reiterated in Congress as well when they're pushing for the release of education funds. This plays out on the voter side as well. And also rural, suburban, and urban. Like that's a pretty similar number there, 81, 87, 91% support for after school among those different geographical regions, which is incredible too. And then the last piece here, support for public funding is high. So this is asking voters like, do you support or would you like your newly elected officials at the federal, state, and local level to provide more funding for after school programs? And this is something that we see strong support among Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. So that's kind of what I like to end this on. Like all the work that's happening in programs, it's seen by the general public, and it's also seen by members of Congress that we saw play out last month with the release of 21st Century Funds. So I will end it there, Cantrell. I don't know if we have an opportunity for questions or Q&As. Happy to do that. Also happy to just drop a little QR code there if you're interested in staying up to date on all of our policy news. Also, you got contact information for Eric Peterson there. I apologize. I'll drop in my contact information. That was a holdover slide from Eric there, but I'll drop in my contact information in just a second.
All right. Well, we know, Chris, they're not going to be up the wrong alley if they do contact Eric. So definitely would welcome your
If you do contact Eric, wait until Monday. Eric is on a 3-week vacation. The man has not had a vacation in years. And we are trying not to bug him. So if you do want to reach out to Eric, please wait until Monday when he's back in the office.
All right. If I could ask the audience to use either in chat or your reaction button to show our appreciation for the information that Chris just shared to us. Invaluable, really organized, hopefully could understand the flow, and also to mention a lot you heard about the federal pathway for the out of school time regarding 21st century. What we'd like to do now, if there's no questions, and we will pause for a second, is we're going to take a little dive into a few resources that were sent out over the past couple of months, just to, have a walkthrough, just so you understand exactly what that resource is asking of you. I won't be able to complete any in the moment because it does require you to identify your address so that the information or the message that you're sharing is going to the correct legislator. So I'll pause for a moment before we get into a few resources for any questions you may have for Chris.
I do have a question. What is the best source for longitudinal data on success outcomes?
That's a good question. We've got, and I'm trying to remember if this has been like fully released yet, but there is a longitudinal study it's a 20+ year study done by out in University of California, Irvine, that looks at kind of participation from early care up through middle school, high school, and into profession, and really reinforcing the value that after school, the key piece in that. Let me see if it's been fully published yet. We've been utilizing some of it as in talking points, but I'm not entirely sure. Ooh, we might have one there by Brenda. There we go. That's it. Yeah, Dr. Deb Vandell is kind of the key researcher on that, and she's been following this cohort of now young people really and professionals, but following them from early care all the way through that process, and have really seen the value of after school in that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else? Anything in the chat we're missing? Anybody want to unmute themselves?
There's a question there. I mean, I know this was a big focus and still remains a big focus, Project 2025. If you don't know what that is, look it up. There wasn't really anything around after school in particular in Project 2025. However, I mean, I think it was lumped into education in general in some of the actions that were taken around education, and a lot of it I think was played out in like this withholding of funds that the Office of Management and Budget, that strategy that they pursued in July, and basically essentially challenging the courts to step in. We're fortunate that we didn't have to wait on that, and members of Congress were able to step in and really free that money up. But there's nothing particular around after school itself that I've seen, that or at least that I remember seeing in Project 2025.
Hey, thank you, Chris. And thanks for the question that was asked in the chat by Ann. Thank you, Ann. Okay, we're going to move forward with a couple of quick walkthroughs with some of the resources. The first one just dropped in the chat, was released during that holding of dollars that Chris spoke about for the 21st century programs. The thing here. So I'm going to share, if you or when you do click that link, it will take you to this page right here. And Chris, please jump in if we don't need to participate in this anymore. But we do see here was the release of funds for the local and summer after school programs, where the goal was for 4,000 entries. We're at 3,906. So I wanted to give Pennsylvania another opportunity here with this resource to complete by filling out your first name, last name, email address, your street address, so whether you're using your home or the address of your program, and the message is already pre-typed and ready to go for you. You hit the add your voice, and now you become part of the over 3,900 people that have responded to this resource, soliciting the continuation of the 21st century funds for not just summer, but also after school. So I'm looking at our participants here on this session at about 45 or so. If each of us took the time to click that link, fill out this and hit the your voice, and we tapped one of our coworkers to do the same, we would meet this goal. So let's go, Pennsylvania. Let's see what we can do here to get to that 4,000 mark. The next resource I want to show and share with you all, and this is available public as well, is the Pennsylvania's return on investment study that was done to support the state funding for out of school time here in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to share that return on investment study for view right now, but also we'll drop the link in the chat. Major reason of sharing this is because this will give you some really detailed points, and even when it comes to like data and dollars, of how out of school time has an impact here in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, Chris talked a lot about the federal and the avenues to advocate on that level. Here is more specific to the state of Pennsylvania. This is what the network believes, and those that help support this study helped us get across the finish line and get the boost program dollars approved last year in the state budget. If you're not aware, we do have, or there is a proposal for a $10 million increase to the $11.5 million that was released last year. So that would put Pennsylvania a little over $21 million for out of school time funding at the state level. So this is the information where you can gather your talking points for when you reach out to your legislator. I'd note probably right on page 1 of the report, third paragraph, you can see where it has the return on investment for each dollar spent in Pennsylvania. It's a return on investment of $6.69. So through your advocacy learning and your advocacy experiences, it's kind of like advocacy 101 when you have that 15 seconds or less than 1 minute to talk with your legislator on the way to the elevator or up the steps. that's the type of information, or this is the type of information that you can hand to them or verbally express to them about the impact of out of school time. So please take some time, review this report, and it will give you those important talking points that I'm speaking of for your conversation with legislator. Give me 1 second. I'll go in here and drop the link to that report. Okay, the Pennsylvania's return on investment report is in the chat. Again, take some time to familiarize yourself with the report and the outcomes there, as that has had an impact here in Pennsylvania on the funding. Next, when you get that information, read through that report and collecting all of your stories from your program participants and stakeholders. We then ask you to share that with your legislator, or that be part of your legislative visit. So I'm going to give me 1 second. I'm going to share the screen on how to locate or find your legislator. All right, moving right along here. You'll now find in your chat box the link to Find My Legislator. When you click that link, it will take you to the shared screen that I'm sharing with you all right now. The Pennsylvania's General Assembly, Find My Legislator. So here you'll put in your address, city, and zip. Again, whether it's your home address or whether it's the program address, it could give you a different legislator, right? Depending on where the boundaries or the border or municipality is. So here is where you would enter that information, and it would provide the legislator in your district to you. If you scroll down just a little bit, also on that page, you'll see an interactive map here where you can hover over. So I'll use Dauphin County, is where we're located at, where I'm located at. So I'll click on Dauphin County, and I'm just gonna stop the share and then reshare in case it's not picking up on the clicks that I'm doing here. So when I hover on that map, the interactive map, and I click on the county, here it lays out the members of the Senate. If I keep scrolling down, it lists the members of the House. It also has the municipalities that's being served. So this should be an easy find of locating your legislator. Once you locate your legislator on that dashboard, it will give you the option to contact that legislator. And then what does that look like, right? So I'm also going to drop in the chat right now a list of the Pennsylvania state, a link that goes straight to the Pennsylvania state legislators. And then we're going to take a peek at that page so we can do a quick walkthrough. I promise that's the last resource for today that I'm dropping in the chat, but that right there will take you to this page. So clicking that link will take you to this page right here. It probably will start on sort by all. So hopefully you can see where I'm hovering on some tabs right above the first line of photos or pictures. It has sort by name, sort by district, filter by Democrat, and then filter by Republican. I'm just going to stop my share again to make sure that we all are seeing what I hope for us all to see. So I specifically have now on the screen as shared the filter by Republican. So here is where I believe Pennsylvania can continue to build the momentum that what we have right now about the importance of out of school time programs. Particularly reaching out to the Republicans on the GOP side would be strategic for us to do in the state. When we look at our current after-school caucus and the support, whether it's at our action day or showing up at different events, we seem to have the democratic support for the out-of-school time here in Pennsylvania. And I know there is support on the GOP or the Republican side as well. We just have to do our job and educate and bring the awareness to them about what is happening in their districts. So I would really ask that you filter by Republican in your search in your respected district, and then reach out to that respected legislator. Under their profile picture, you'll see the email icon. Some have a Facebook, some have X, some have YouTube. Use what's available there on your outreach to the legislator. Again, using some of the information from a return on investment, using information that is having the impact of your program itself. So whether it's pictures, whether it's events, this is part of the educating and making after school, bringing the awareness to the legislator is all about. I can tell you that on the other side of reaching out to say, look at my program, look what we're doing. It's not that a lot of the legislators don't care. Many I'm finding out aren't aware of the impact of out of school time, and let alone aware of that happening in their own district. You'll hear me say a lot, after school has come from a long way of jump rope, kickball, and hopscotch. We know that this space is now just not important. We know it's essential. So my final thought, before I turn it over here to Aisha to close us out, is that if you think you're too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. Now that is an African proverb, just for you all to understand that we all have a role. All of our role is important, and know that your role in reaching out to your legislator is very, very important for the space that we serve our students, families, and community at large. I'll turn it over to Aisha for closeout, and thank you all for coming and participating in today's session.
All right, so that concludes our session for today. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. And I'd like to thank Chris Neitzey for taking the time to share this information with us. If you could, please take a moment to complete the evaluation survey that's been posted in the chat, and that is also on the slide. And again, that concludes setting the stage for advocacy. Thank you for joining us, and have an amazing day.